The scandal at the Colorado Supreme Court is that anytime there is a complaint against a judicial officer for misconduct, it needs to be sent to the Commission on Judicial Discipline. The Supreme Court was skirting that and taking care of matters in their own hands whenever they felt appropriate, and therefore the Commission knew nothing about it, and matters were taken care of that the public was never made aware of.
You're a guy who's seen it on the inside. You know, you're supposed to be defending the system, and you're not.
I'm not, because the system's broken.
Retired Judge Dennis Maes, you've seen his work in Colorado politics, and we've got to ask about reforming Colorado's judiciary. So the big question is, what's an average bribe going for these days?
2 donuts and a cup of coffee.
I thought you needed more for that for a judge.
Okay, we'll go 2 donuts and 2 cups of coffee.
2 cups of coffee. How long were you a judge in, was it the 10th?
10th Judicial District.
You were the Chief Judge.
I was Chief Judge for 17 years, and I served for 24 years.
All right. So you've seen the Colorado system of how we choose a judge, how we retain judges, how it all happens.
Absolutely, and I also had the opportunity to serve on the Commission on Judicial Discipline before I became a judge, and before I became a judge, I served on the Colorado Supreme Court Nominating Commission.
All right, and Colorado kind of has this odd system where the governor picks a Supreme Court justice, but he doesn't get to choose the pool. So that group you just talked about actually has to bring 3 nominations, and he can choose one of the 3, but he can't just choose anyone he wants. Is that right?
He has to pick one of the 3. That's correct.
Okay. I want to go from the general and then kind of bring it down. It seems as though our courts have been in a little trouble lately. They're not doing as well with public image. There's some scandals that have been going on. There's some things that have been kept secret. And people are starting to finally notice about Colorado courts. And people are talking about maybe it's time to reform the courts. I'll be one of those people. Colorado has something called the Missouri system. Do I have that right?
Yes.
All right. So explain that to me. I know in some states they elect judges. In some states they're appointed, and they're appointed for life. Some of them, they're Republicans and Democrats, and you get a vote on them. Here we have something called retention, which I'm not a big fan of. What's the history of how Colorado got this system of courts?
Well, there used to be a time when judges were popularly elected. And there was a feeling back in the 60s that that probably really wasn't the way to pick somebody that's going to be a fair and impartial person.
This is 1960s, right?
1966, about that time is when they adopted the plan. And the plan is that each judicial district has a nominating commission made up of citizens from that particular community. The vast majority, or the majority of them, are non-lawyers, but there are lawyers on them that are appointed by various entities. They convene anytime there is a vacancy on the court, and their responsibility is to interview the applicants. And after reviewing the applicants, they submit no less than 2 nor more than 3 names on the county court and district court level to the governor for his selection. On the appellate court level, Court of Appeals and the Supreme Court, they select 3 names that have to be submitted to the governor, and then the governor appoints one of those 3.
So the real politicking of who's going to be the next, let's call it Supreme Court nominee, it's not really getting to the governor first, it's actually getting to the appointment committee to make sure that the guy you want is one of those 3.
That happens, yes. And I forgot to mention, John, that the governor, once he receives the names, has 15 days in which he must make the appointment. And if he fails to do so, then the Chief Justice of the Colorado Supreme Court makes the appointment. There is a few politicking going on during that 15-day period.
I didn't know that one.
Oh, yeah.
Why is this called the Missouri system?
It's it was just the kind of the compromise between the election and some other way of selecting judges in terms of providing transparency, and yet having the public involved in it. That was one of the key things.
All right, let me pressure this on this one. The public is not involved in this. Lawyers might be involved in the nominating committee, but it's not like we get a whole say until after a judge has served for a few years, and then we can either vote them out of office or to stay in office. It's up or down. They're not running against anybody. We really don't know much about our judges. I think back on those times when it's elect Bob as your county judge. Well, you know Bob, you see Bob, and you know who he is. There's something about that says, well, what was wrong with that system of electing judges? You have a Republican judge and a Democratic judge, and they work their way through the system, and the people get to decide. Why? Was that a bad idea?
The bad idea was at the time thought of as being letting the electorate make the choice. I will tell you, John, my own personal opinion is I was a staunch supporter of the Missouri Plan.
Mm-hmm.
I have since, because of the recent scandal with the Colorado Supreme Court and the compromise that's taken place in the various commissions, which are the nominating commissions, the performance commissions, and the Commission on Judicial Discipline, that I haven't gotten there yet, but I am getting to the point where I might be saying if there's going to be so much politics and corruption involved at those levels, then let's go back to popular election and let the people in the communities know.
All right,
Now,
to hear a judge say that is really astounding, because most people I know from states that have elected judges go, "Whew, there's problems," because what happens when the judge has to rule on one of the big campaign contributors? You've got judges who then become campaigners rather than judges. So that tells me you are really concerned about what's going on in Colorado.
Oh, I'm very concerned. As I said, I'm not at all at this point in time suggesting we go back to popular election of judges. But the point is, if the safeguards that were implemented during the Missouri Plan to provide for transparency and integrity in the selection and retention of judges no longer holds water because of compromises, then what difference does it make? What difference does it make where the compromise is, whether it's this person making the compromise or the electorate?
Compromise between what?
I'm going to give you an example of what I mean by compromise. Okay? A situation that recently came up with appointments on the Colorado Supreme Court Nominating Commission.
Mm-hmm.
There were 2 Court of Appeals positions open. The commissioners sent 6 names over to the governor, 3 for one position, 3 for the other. Not unusual. One of the individuals that was sent over to the governor was privy to a memo that took place during the scandal that I was referring to earlier. Was also a intern and a clerk for Justice Coates. Subsequently moved over to the Phil Weiser's office in the State Attorney General's office, and was specifically tasked during this scandal to represent the Judicial Department at that time, in which there were a lot of impediments that were put before the commission to get to where they wanted to get in terms of these allegations and stuff. To the extent that any criminal charges that might have been brought and might have had an impact on getting other people to talk about the scandal were for naught, because they, meaning the Denver District Attorney, the Colorado Supreme Court, and the Attorney General's office, allowed the statute of limitations to run, and there was no way to put any pressure on anybody to say anything more. They didn't have to talk. So the point being is that person was up for this judgeship. Boatwright was the liaison, the judge overseeing the selection process.
Supreme Court Justice here in Colorado.
Yeah. And knew all of this stuff about this individual. And yet I don't know whether or not he told the other commissioners about all of these things that had happened and this person's involvement in the scandal, or at least his role in what was going on in the scandal. I'm not saying he did anything, but he was involved in it. And so the Supreme Court Justice knows about it. The Attorney General knows about it. It goes over to Polis. Polis knows about it because people pointed out to him that, are you familiar with this particular attorney and what's happened? And guess who Polis appointed? The attorney. So in my opinion, that was that they compromised the system there. I mean, I don't understand how anybody with that kind of an ethical cloud over his head could get to that point.
Is this just you saying, I don't like that guy? If this was a different guy who was a buddy of yours, or you liked his judicial style better, would it have been all right?
I have no knowledge about this individual other than what I told you. And I'm basing it solely on those facts that have been presented. And, I think David Magoya, I think, wrote an article on it as well.
Tell me about, for those who don't know, and let's condense it into just, as Joe Friday would say, just the facts. What is the scandal at the Colorado Supreme Court?
The scandal at the Colorado Supreme Court is that anytime there is a complaint against a judicial officer for misconduct, it needs to be sent to the Commission on Judicial Discipline. The Supreme Court was skirting that and taking care of matters in their own hands whenever they felt appropriate, and therefore the Commission knew nothing about it, and matters were taken care of that the public was never made aware of. And that's since come out to be the problem. And
because it looks like there was a $2 million payout that happened to a former employee to keep things quiet?
There would have been.
Am I putting that the right way?
There would have been if Mr. Magoya hadn't broken the story. So they never did consummate the contract, but that's where they were headed. And it was a point of discussion during this last summer in the interim committee that was studying judicial reform. And
so let me just, from a layperson, you're a lawyer, and you're a judge. You know the minutia, you know the system inside and out. As just a regular guy, I think I know more than most Coloradans about how Colorado's system of laws work, how politics works. I understand the different branches. And there's a lot of attention that goes to the governor. He can call a press conference, and there's people who can look at his records. We have the open records laws. What goes on in the legislature? There's reporters there. They actually have desks right there, and they have spots and tables right there in the chambers, and they know these people. We know them. We can see their open records. That third branch is just opaque to most people, including me. Once every other year or so, we get to vote on what are retentions. Shall Judge Dennis Maes be retained? And you always get retained. They all get retained. The Blue Book has this section of reviews, and each one says, yes, we recommend you retain him. And they always win by 70%, it seems, sometimes 75%. So there's no real accountability. Nobody knows if this is a good judge, a bad judge. And more importantly, it doesn't say anything about his judicial point of view. The review is about, does he run a good courtroom? Does he do things on time? Does he keep a good schedule? All right, those are nice procedural things. But if he's a screaming communist, or he's working for the fascist party on the side, or I'd like to know that. And I'd like to know what his philosophy is. Is he a strict constitutionist? Does he believe the Constitution is a living, breathing document? These things would help me make a decision. So like many, I just vote no on all of them, and they still pass by 70%. It just seems like that Colorado's justice system is, I don't want to say secretive, but I don't know what goes on. Am I off?
It is secretive, and you're absolutely right. And that's one of the other areas that's been compromised. I talked a little bit about the Commission on Judicial Discipline, the performance commissions. For instance, there was an article recently about one of the judges that was submitted to Governor Polis for a possible appointment to the Court of Appeals had an enormous amount of decisions reversed. And now I'm not suggesting that just reversals in and of themselves or something, but If you do a deep dive into them and the judge keeps making the same mistake over and over and doesn't care, maybe you have an idea about a political bent, a philosophical bent, an unwillingness to learn the law, those sorts of things. So in that event, it appeared to me that there was somewhat compromise. There needs to be a much deeper dive by the performance commissions into how they provide the information to the public. And I would go as far to say, John, and I think this might have happened early on in the process, that public hearings, people have a right to go to a public hearing and say, this is what I want to say about it. Now, I have a different belief in terms of trial judges and appellate judges. I think appellate judges obviously have
Explain the difference.
Okay, a trial judge is somebody that presides over a case, a county court judge or a district court judge. General jurisdiction.
I'm going in for my divorce. I'm having a fight. I'm going to see that judge.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or if you have a DUI, it's county court, okay?
Got it.
But in any event, those judges, and as I've indicated how long I've been a judge, I've always been very impressed with them. Do we make mistakes? Absolutely, we make mistakes. But I've never felt that they were the ones that were trying to decide what policy should be. Now, once you get up to the Court of Appeals and the Supreme Court, that's exactly something that could happen. And I think that there ought to be a way to discern whether or not a potential appellate court judge or Supreme Court judge has those bents of mind. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean if they do that they shouldn't be selected, but the public should know about it. And perhaps it's time for the appellate court judges, at the very least, to be subjected to Senate confirmation like they are on the federal level.
Which they're not here in Colorado.
They're not. It's the same system. The governor gets 3 names, and he picks one of the 3 names. And there's that 15-day period where you can provide public comment, but nobody knows about it. You know,
you can provide public comment.
You can call the governor's office and say, hey, here's why this person should not be appointed. Or, contrarily, this person is fabulous, outstanding, you know, and should be appointed.
So in the federal system, you know, I think about it that we all know how it works in Washington. The president can choose anyone. He could choose his mechanic and say, I want him to be the new Chief Justice when the other old one retires, and this is what I want. And he has to get advice and consent from the Senate. They have to go through this. And the Senate has been good in blocking a lot of those nominations. It becomes a very political process. In fact, during the Trump years, there were hundreds of judges waiting to be confirmed, but they just sat on it. And then when the other team's in charge, they do the same game. Are you suggesting that be something we do here in Colorado?
I'm suggesting it's something that we should definitely take a close look at. And I'm not suggesting that maybe
That's not a good answer. We should look at lots of things. Do you think we ought to do it?
Yeah, I would not have any problems with it at all.
Really?
I would not have any problem. I don't know that I'd go through the advice and consent thing, but I certainly believe that any potential appellate court judge should stand public scrutiny.
And that so help me with this. Let me see if I'm tracking. We have this system that we've had since the 60s, and the system, the Missouri system, means that these commissions choose who's going to be chosen. So, governor, here are our 3 picks. You choose one. He doesn't have the choice to do all of them. But still, after overwhelmingly having Democrats in control of the governor's office, except for 8 years under Bill Owens, you know, it's no wonder there's not a Republican-nominated Supreme Court justice right now, and the whole system is I'd say out of touch from my points of view, but other people disagree. So we have this system, and then the check and balance is every couple of years we get to say you can keep your job, but we have no information.
That's where I'm suggesting. As a matter of fact, what it is, each judge that's initially appointed has a 2-year provisional term, and then they come up for retention.
Right.
On the county court level, it's every 4 years. District court level, it's every 6 years. Court of Appeals, it's every 8 years, and Supreme Court's every 10 years. One of the suggestions I would make with regard to that is, one is a much deeper dive into how we go about evaluating judges and present that to the
What does that
community.
look like? Because here's what I see. I see people who are inside the system grading their teacher. You know, it's like, oh, how did you judge? And so you survey the attorneys. If the attorneys want to give it back, you survey the plaintiffs and the defendants, but well after the case is gone, and you get some of the, did he run a nice courtroom? Were the plants watered? Were the windows clean? These are not things I care about. I'm joking about those questions, but it seems like that. There's nothing about the guy's philosophy. There's nothing that tells me what this guy stands for. But all I know is the name pops up, and the Blue Book says each and every one of them have to be retained. In what they call football, but it's actually just soccer out in England, the bottom 4 teams that lose get relegated down to the lower benches. Why can't we do the same thing with judges? Right now it's Lake Wobegon. Every judge is above average when it comes to this review. The review doesn't work.
I want to correct you on one thing, John. I don't know if that's appropriate or not.
It is inappropriate. You will not do it.
Okay, but we're going to do it anyway.
Right.
So you're absolutely right. The vast majority of judges are retained, and the vast majority of judges are retained with some pretty amazing statistics. I think there needs to be perhaps, I think there should be a look at what is the algorithm that we're going to use to say, in order for a judge to be retained, this judge has to receive X percentage of positive votes. And if they don't get retained. The other thing is I think that at the Court of Appeals and Supreme Court level, that there should be a 10-year term on those. And at the end of their 10-year term, they go find other work, and we go through the process. But they should not be eligible for retention. And so that there, in essence, it would be a term limit.
So let me see if I'm hearing you right. The first one I think I agree with, which is, since they all get 70%, instead of a 50% threshold, can we bump it up to 55 or 60%? Right. And therefore, those on the margin are more likely to get kicked off. If there's term limits for judges, won't they be looking at how they rule? Because they'll be ruling to get a job afterwards and not ruling on law.
Okay, now again, we're talking about the term limits would be for appellate judges only, Court of Appeals and Supreme Court. And that then brings in the discipline part of this thing. And how is a judge behaving during his or her term while on there? And what matters can be referred for consideration by whatever body, and it should not be the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court should be eliminated from being involved in any one of these processes, as far as I'm concerned.
And are they involved now?
They're involved at every level. But they appoint people to the nominating commissions, they appoint people to the performance commissions, and they appoint the judges that serve on the Commission on Judicial Discipline.
Time out here. Let me see if I'm getting this. The Supreme Court, who we vote on whether or not to retain, they put people on the committees that evaluate and put onto the Blue Book whether or not they should be retained.
Including the Supreme Court justices.
Isn't that just a complete conflict of interest?
Doesn't it seem that way? They do that on all 3 of the commissions, the Nominating Commission, the Performance Commission, and the Commission on Judicial Discipline. And if you want something that I could show you that's really bothered me a lot is we've been going through this stuff with this scandal. David Prince, a judge from Colorado Springs, was one of the co-chairs of the committee, and he was very active in being critical of the Supreme Court. David's term expired at the end of June, but he was eligible for reappointment. That appointment would have come from Chief Justice Boatwright. Chief Justice Boatwright refused to appoint him.
Because he's been critical.
He refused to appoint him. That's what I could tell you.
Right.
And I made a statement to the interim committee that I thought it would certainly smack of retaliation if Judge Prince was not appointed. Right. So
I'm still dealing with this one. So help me out, Dennis. The Supreme Court chooses the people who evaluate them. The Supreme Court chooses
Some of them.
Some of them. Some of the people who discipline them if they go wrong, and they're the ones who also do what was the third?
The nominating.
The nominations.
Yeah.
Who's going to replace them?
Yeah. They're involved in every step of it.
So in other words, you've got judges who are building an empire to make sure that their judicial philosophy continues.
That certainly could be argued, and that is why I have come to the position I've had now on how I'm reversing myself on the Missouri plan, because the very systems that I thought were in place to protect the integrity of the system have all now been compromised, in my opinion.
All right, so be really specific. If you could wave the wand and you have all the power, what change would you make?
The one change I would make is I would remove the Supreme Court from any decision, appointment making with regard to those three particular commissions. I would remove them completely because I've lost trust and faith in them. That's Dennis Maes saying that, but that's the one thing. That's the first thing I would do. I would remove the Supreme Court from any involvement in the process.
That's fascinating. How do you get regular people involved in that process? When it comes to the governor, we all vote. When it comes to our representatives, we all vote. Here, it seems like a pretty incestuous system that we don't vote except for this silly retention. It is so opaque. We have no idea who these guys in black robes are until they rule on a case for us or one that's very, very important to us.
John, and I know from a previous admonition you gave me and saying, "Oh, come on now, give me something that I can bite into and stuff." I think that's where the work is. I think we need to re-examine the whole system to see what can work so that there actually is transparency, that the public is involved, integrally involved, and if need, make the changes to do that. So that would take some work, but I think it could be several. It could be a hybrid where maybe the legislature makes the appointments or somebody else. A deep dive into, okay, what can be the most effective way and the most transparent way to select people that are going to do what the intention of the commission is. That's the thing. And it might be some elected, some appointed, hybrids, certain percentage of attorneys. The attorneys should never be the majority of any of the commissions.
Are they now?
They're not.
Okay.
And that's a good thing. And not that I have faith in attorneys, but they're in front of the judge all the time.
Yeah, they're ones kissing up to the judge.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
Well, whatever, But
oh, you're a judge. I'm sorry. They never kiss up.
Well, they don't do it anymore, John. I've lost all kind of power. I'm sorry.
At what point would you say? You mentioned direct elected of judges. That one seems to me to be the atomic option. That's the nuclear option. Mm-hmm. When all else fails, we're going to elect these guys. If you guys don't shape up, we're just going to elect you. Is that the nuclear option?
Yeah. Yeah, it is. If we've lost all confidence in those commissions that we're going to safeguard the system, and we don't have any trust in them anymore, then what difference does it make what you have? I mean, would you rather have the rogues that are the general public, or the rogues that, because of whomever they are, got appointed to be the rogue? I don't know if I make any sense to you. But
you really think it's that bad right now?
I think it's getting there. I really do. I've never been more disappointed in the Colorado State judicial system as I am right now, and I held them in high esteem during the time I served. I served under Tony Volek, Mary Malarkey, and Mike Bender, and I was proud of the service.
Those are all Chief Justices.
And I was proud of the way they handled their integrity, their ethics. They were all tough in a different way, but I had a great deal of respect for them. And, I left when Mike Bender was still the Chief Justice. But what I've seen the last 3-4 years has just really left me very sad.
Now, I've heard that when you go to law school, they drill into you, being a lawyer is nice. What you want to be as a judge. I've heard that's programmed in the DNA. Man, if I could be a judge, that's what lawyering is all about. Do I have that one right?
No, I think that was that seemed to have much more credence earlier on. Uh, I can tell you why I applied to be a judge and all that. I don't know that that's important, but you know what I found, John, is the when we have these vacancies anymore, the very sparse number of lawyers that are applying for these jobs
As compared to in the past?
as compared to in the past. And
Why is that?
I'm not sure. I think they probably figured out a way to make a lot of money, although being a judge is a well-paying job.
What is it? What does it pay?
I think, I don't know specifics, but I think a district court judge makes around $175,000 a year. They got benefits.
Plus benefits? That's
they
really
don't have
nice.
any overhead. You know, that's a nice salary. I don't care. Maybe the people in Aspen wouldn't like it. Well, don't live in Aspen. You know what I mean? So
What about a Supreme Court justice here? Do you know what they make?
I think they might be close to 200,000.
Okay.
So, but let me give you. I lost my train of thought on this.
Not being able to get people to apply for the job.
Oh, let me tell you. So we talked about the nominating commissions. I was aware of a situation that occurred in my district recently when there was going to be where there was a vacancy, and the notice is, hey, we have a vacancy. Here's what's going to happen. You have to have your application submitted by X date, okay? And for some reason, all of a sudden, the notice is, oh, by the way, we've extended the application date. Now, I don't know what happened, John, but I can tell you this. What went through my mind is, why did you do that? Have you done that before?
Right.
Is there somebody out there that you wanted to apply that didn't apply and you want to encourage them to apply? Were you dissatisfied with the quality of the people you had? I don't know what those answers are. But in my opinion, it didn't matter. If you're not satisfied with the quality, that's what you got. That's what you pick from. You should be out there.
Judges should all be about rules.
Right.
Right. And you don't change the rules.
In the middle of the game.
Right.
You know, and so one of the suggestions I would make is that with regard to that particular process is perhaps there ought to be a rule of a set of rules that govern. You know, if in fact you're going to extend the period of time for applications, what are the reasons for it? Tell us why you're doing that. Is it because you want John Caldera to be the judge and he hasn't applied yet, but you have time now to go recruit him? That's no good. Is it because you think the applicant pool isn't very strong? Well, that's not your job. Your job is to select those that have applied.
On these people on these commissions, are they paid?
No.
So these are all volunteers.
Yes.
So here's what I have found about volunteers. People who are volunteers on commissions or boards and commissions, they are hyper partisan. That they have an agenda. If people who go on the energy advisory board for a city are usually anti-fossil fuel people. They are there for a reason, because it's a lot of really boring work for no pay. You've really got to care about this stuff. And so my sense is those people who are on these committees are there because, well, they want the courts to go in a certain way. I know you probably feel I'm wrong, but normal people don't sign up for that kind of duty. We've got kids to raise and jobs to go to and all the rest. It seems to me interested parties, concentrated interests are the ones who are most likely to do this.
So what's your opinion of me because I'm on the school board down in Pueblo? That's for another topic.
But that's an elected position.
Right.
You went off and you ran, and you had to. The voter said, "I like what he's saying. I don't like what he's saying." You present yourself.
Yeah.
It's not that somebody else said, "Hey, Maes, yeah, go do this," you know, and you signed up for it. There's just something different. It's how, or let me put it differently. How easy is it to fill these commissions?
It's fairly easy. I mean, there are people out there, and probably for the reasons. And I don't want to be naive. It happens. You know, they have only one. I can't remember what the breakdown is, John. Forgive me on that, but there's a requirement that only a certain number of people can be from one particular party. Okay. But if it's 4-3, it's 4-3, right? I mean, any way you cut it. but let me answer your question directly, and I'm more familiar at the local level with the
Right.
district court and the county court. Uh, what I find is that the commissioners are too lenient, and that they like everybody. And so you have a complaint maybe with a particular judge that, hey, we can't ever get an order out of this judge. It takes forever to get an order, and so they bring, it's time for their evaluation. The performance commission brings them in and says, Maes, you need to get busy and get your orders out. You can't be doing this. You got to treat people nicer than you've been treating them the whole bit. Well, I promise you that's what I'm going to do, okay? My next retention election 6 years from now, they said, Maes, you need to get your opinions out. You need to treat people nicer. There needs to be a mechanism in between that time, if the commission believes that way, to fact check them to see whether or not it's going. And there needs to be consequences if they're not complying with it. And I don't know right off the bat what that is. Maybe it's a complaint to the Commission on Judicial Discipline. I know. But my point is this, John. What you were saying is, I think, I don't know if it's the opposite, but oh, geez, they work so hard. They put in a lot of hours. Well, what didn't you understand about the job description? I mean, that's not an excuse. If they're not performing the way they're supposed to, your job is to let them know that and then hold them to the standard. And if they don't hold to the standard, we need to talk about how we hold them to the standard. What is the mechanism in place in order to make sure that Maes said, okay, he said he was going to do now. Let's find out if he did it or not.
So you do a lot of things like, we need to talk about this. There needs to be discussion. We need to dive into this. In the world of law, what's frustrating for me is it's very gray. Did the guy win the election? No, he lost it. Yes, he did. Did the bill pass? Yes, it did. No, it didn't. And so in the world of the other two branches, things are very binary. It won or lost, it was vetoed or whatever. Here, even when you get a decision is rarely yes or no. There's subtleties and there's concepts, and it depends on, it's gray. And that's why it's really uncomfortable, I think, for voters, myself included, when we talk about this. So how do we come to these reforms? I mean, we can put something on the ballot. That means, one group says, here's a great idea and does it as an initiative. If the legislature does it, what review process do they do? It seems to me we need a champion who goes, this is broken, here's the fix.
John, and maybe this is pie in the sky, I don't know. But I still want to believe that there are people that care about the system, that have extreme differences in how they look at the system, but can come together for the common good and say, okay, I'm willing to do this. Even though I don't particularly like this, I think it's a move in the right direction. The other side says, me too. I'm willing to do that. I think there are those people out there like that. Now, politics always screws everything up, but I really believe that's where it needs to be, that you have well-meaning people that come together and say, wherever the chips fall, that's where they're going to fall. And that's the system that we're going to put together.
Is there any state out there that you think is doing it better?
I can't talk to that. I really don't. I've not done a deep study like that. I will tell you an individual that is very knowledgeable in this area is Judge David Prince, who was on the Colorado Commission on Judicial Discipline. That's done a lot of studying on it, and he's written extensively on it as well. And he'd probably have an answer to that, but I can't give you an answer. I don't know. I just wish. I'm terribly disappointed with the system the way it is.
What's telling for me is you're a guy who's seen it on the inside. You're supposed to be defending the system, and you're not.
I'm not, because the system's broken.
That is terrifying to me.
Be a lawyer and an ex-judge, somebody who was proud to be a lawyer, proud to be a judge, proud of the profession, and has seen what's happened to it basically because of the leadership at the highest level of the Supreme Court. And do I enjoy saying that? I don't enjoy saying it, but it is truth to power. You mentioned just on a maybe, I don't know, a comical note or not. We were having a discussion one time at our judges meetings. The chief judges used to get together, and we'd have our quarterly meetings and stuff. And someone suggested, well, maybe what we ought to do is one of the ways to evaluate a judge is see how many times he or she's been reversed. And I said, well, I don't think that tells you. And I said, I don't think that tells you a whole lot. I said, besides that, you know what the Supreme Court is? The Supreme Court is the court of final error.
Right.
Nobody, they're last.
Yeah.
They're last. Doesn't necessarily mean they're right.
It just means that they're last. Well, and also then you have the same problem that I think you hear with doctors, that a lot of doctors don't want to take on patients who might have a more difficult challenge because they don't want their surgery record to look bad. You just do safe surgeries, and then look, 100% of my patients, they all survive. Well, that's because you're not taking on the patients that need real help, because you're like, no, I'll let somebody else do that one, and his record will look bad.
If you have no integrity in any part of life,
well, that would be me.
But particularly a judge, John, I can't tell you the number of times that I would have liked to have ruled differently than I did.
Really?
And I'm sitting there going, so no, here's what the law says, and here's where the facts take me. And so this is the proper thing to do. It doesn't have a damn thing to do with me.
Then you do not belong on the Colorado Supreme Court.
I don't think I'm too old now to belong. And not only that, I don't think I get a very popular vote out of them.
I have seen them make things out of whole cloth, and I think they make up laws, particularly when it came to the Taxpayer Bill of Rights and their opinion on what calendar days are in the session. And it's like, it's right there. It's right there. They even wrote it for you. It's
we have a problem sometimes with plain language.
I've noticed. Well, let's finish up this. What's the best thing about being a judge?
Changing people's lives. I've always said that, particularly in the criminal area, the easiest thing for a judge to do is say, I've had enough of you, you're going to prison. You're out of mind, out of sight. The hard thing to do is say, what are we going to do to get you back so that you can be a productive member of society? Help people get back to a feeling of worth and value. And I say that realizing that I've worked with some people that never deserved to see the light of day again. But that's what a judge should be doing, is how do we make things better for people? How do we get people back into the mainstream of their lives, regardless? For instance, a divorce case. Nobody's going to be happy or anything like that, but one thing, if you get your order out and it's well done and the whole bit, at least they have finality to it. They're back on their feet. But you got the judge I was talking about who can't get an order out for 6 months, and so these folks are just living in limbo all that period of time, not knowing what the heck they're going to do. Obviously, we get, hey, this is the way Maes is going to feel about sentencing in this particular crime, So if you go before him, that that. There's some good to that, because are you going to plea bargain? Are you going to go? Are you going to take your shot and go to trial? And by the way, you go to trial, I know much more than I would have known had you not gone to trial. So you're rolling the dice there. But changing lives.
What's the worst thing about being a judge? Just on the day-to-day life of it. What
the trauma of seeing a child hurt.
Yeah,
it's the worst by far. And not only was I involved as a judge, but I was a criminal defense attorney as well. And
how many times do you want to just scream from the bench that you defendant, you're a piece of shit. I can't wait to send you away, whatever it is, but you have to hold your tongue.
A lot.
But
you get your chance. You get your chance at the sentencing, and you can't lose your composure and you can't lose your decency at that time. There are some people that are scumbags, and they are, I refer to people as terrorists, as there's only one way to keep society safe from you, and that's to put you away as long as I can. So you have your chance, but you still have to maintain your professionalism about it.
You ever worry about your safety?
On occasion. Would you like to hear a funny story? So I come to work on a Monday morning, and security comes upstairs and says, "Judge, we need to tell you something. We just got a call from a woman, and she said her boyfriend is really irate, and he just left the house, and he says he's going down to the judicial building, and he's going to kill a Mexican judge." There were 2 Mexican judges at the time. The other one was out of town. I says, could you ask him to wait until the other one gets back, so at least he has a choice, you know? But yeah, there were times that I had people watch my. Yeah, you get used to it after. I don't know if used to it or maybe silly or whatever, but you know, I always made sure when I came home I was aware of my surroundings and stuff like that. You really get worried when you're out in the middle of the Kmart parking lot at 10 o'clock at night and somebody says, "Hey, Judge."
Hey, Judge.
So, but I've never been assaulted. I've had people tell me what they've really thought about me, you know. And as one judge said one time when he was torn down, and the prosecutor said, "Why didn't you do anything?" He said, "Well, I wouldn't have been happy if I was that guy either with what I just did." You know? So there has to be some levity to it as well.
So when you're walking into the court, do you have that Flip Wilson thing going in the background? Here come the judge. Here come the judge. Let's see if you remember if you're old enough for that.
I remember that, but my main worry is not tripping on my robe and falling down in front of everybody.
Why the robe? What you know? In England, they have the stupid wigs because that's where, what.
You know, John, if you're not wearing pants, you better be wearing something.
I'm going to leave it right there. Judge, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Appreciate your time.
If you enjoyed that conversation, by all means, click one of these other great programs. We have the best conversations with the most fascinating Coloradans. And subscribe to our channel. Just click down below and hit that little bell button too. You don't want to miss a single show.